This is not just because of one death that was caught on camera.
I am bringing you to the heart of the protests here in the nation's capital. I am in Washington, D.C., which also happens to be my home. We've seen them protesting all across the country, in fact, in all 50 states.
This is centuries of injustice, and it is boiling over.
I'm Malika Bilal, and I've been covering the protests in the U.S. against police violence and racism. And between us, this is just the beginning.
I'd been feeling heavy just as a human being after the news about the killing of George Floyd broke. I wanted to do something about it in the only way that I can. I went out on Saturday with the intent just to drive by, roll down the window, so at least I could see with my own eyes how many people were out there. And next thing I know, we're parking the car. Minutes into that, pepper spray. That's what greeted us just a few minutes after stepping into that area.
I've been tear gassed before. I've been pepper sprayed. Whew. Covering protests that are not in my own country.
There was no way I couldn't cover the story as a journalist and not just as a human after that.
Thousands of people have gathered. They're marching now from that Capitol, which is the seat of the U.S. legislature, all the way to the White House.
Race is a really difficult thing for people to talk about. People often think you shouldn't cover this community that you are a part of because you're too close to it. I am a Black woman living in the United States, born and raised. My ancestors were not from here, but they were brought here against their will to toil on this land. It has resulted in me now being here today on this chair talking to all of you. I come to any story that affects people in my community with that lens, and it helps inform and embolden my coverage.
The last question, what do you make of the narrative that these protests have brought property destruction and have turned violent?
So as they say, riot is the language of the unheard.
The story is the destruction of life. Police officers not facing accountability. So that's the story.
Just to show you what we've been hearing as residents here in D.C. for the past week.
Since President Donald Trump is here, he has to be seen as dealing with these protests in a way that fits his brand, law and order. That explains why we've seen federal police and National Guard units from all across the country.
We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the epidemic that the nation's facing, that the world is facing. Of course, this is the coronavirus pandemic. And yet, despite that fact, people have still come out into the streets because this is an issue they say is important enough for them.
There is a recognition that this is not a time like any other.
This is bigger than the virus right now. We got to come together.
I think that we are witnessing an unburying and an uncovering of a foundation that's been there since the very beginning of our country. You can't have a country that's built on the decimation of entire societies, and by that I mean the Native American communities, and then a country that is built on the backs of enslaved Africans who literally built so much of this country and not feel the effects and the legacy of it in current day society. We're seeing a global outcry of protests because the effects and the legacy of colonialism, slavery, injustice are not things that are uniquely North American.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Even if these protests die down, what protesters are telling me is that the action and the work and the momentum that was building and has been building, that won't die down. This is not over. What happens next?
Everyone is yelling, we won't leave. They're not going away.